Hello everybody. First of all, I'd like to thank you for taking part in today's webinar. My name's Mike. I'm from the Manufacturing Solutions team of Quadra Solutions, and I'm joined by our Applications Engineer, Matt Hutchinson. The objective today is to raise awareness and demonstrate what best-in-class solutions are being implemented to enable companies to dramatically improve their design data workflows, leading to improved design communication and product quality, and a reduction in costly production errors and overall time to market. As you may well appreciate, nobody wakes up in the morning excited about data management, and at the end of the day, designers didn't get into engineering to manage the design data. With a secure modern system in place, the top performers, or best-in-class companies today, don't have to. Their designers are leaving the data management side of things to the system, so that they can focus their time on actually designing. Just briefly, for those of you who are unsure as to who we are and what we do, Quadra Solutions specialise in CAD software solutions for the manufacturing, engineering and construction industries. We've been working with Autodesk as a value-added reseller for well over a decade now, and as you will see to the top right of the screen, we have an increasing portfolio of specialisations and services under one roof. As an accredited Gold partner, we continue to work successfully with new and existing organisations as their primary technology partner, developing their existing design engineering strategy and workflows, resulting in improved product quality, efficiency, collaboration and reduced costs. We employ a dedicated team of engineering technical experts who carry years of cross-industry experience and know how it all works. Working with these experienced technical professionals provides you with sector-focused solutions beyond just the software and technology. We can assist you with installation, certified Autodesk training and ongoing support, either from our Northwest Support Centre or on site across the length and breadth of the UK. Our customers will tell you that there is much more to us than just a box of software. Our way of partnering with organisations to firstly understand the individual requirements, aspirations and the challenges stands us out from the rest. And as a measure of our performance in 2013, we were presented with the Manufacturing Excellence Award, plus Autodesk's Greatest Growth in Manufacturing New Business for Northern Europe. With today's webinar, we've kept two things in mind. We've tried to keep the presentation section as short as we possibly can, and you'll find that we've tailored the content more towards identifying and addressing the challenges, rather than focusing on differing versions of a product. So, over the next 30 to 40 minutes, we'll run through digital prototyping and the associated design data, some of the everyday challenges experienced across design and engineering teams, how this affects the business and why data management is consequently high up on everyone's agenda. We'll see a couple of external references to research on data management conducted by independent sources, which will lead on to Autodesk solution for addressing those everyday challenges, promptly followed by a demonstration from Matt on some of the relevant features that address them. Throughout this webinar, you'll have the option, of course, to post questions to us using the chat feature at the top right-hand side of the screen. We'll pick up on these questions after Matt's demonstration and hope to be able to answer most of them, if not all of them, on the spot for you. In a world where customers and budget controllers expect you to do more with less in half the time, engineers are taking advantage of digital prototyping technology to rapidly design, test, validate and optimize products, produce realistic visuals to communicate with clients and colleagues, collaborate on the subsequent manufacturing and production workflow, as well as packaging and other non-design departments such as sales, marketing and purchasing. And all this performed entirely within the digital environment. Subsequent versions and revisions can be made, approved and shared instantly, either across teams internally, with engineers on site, or with partners and customers globally. However, as I'm sure the designers amongst us will appreciate, this design freedom has led to an explosion of associated electronic data files, with each product design potentially being made up of multiple data files, links, revisions and affiliated documents. Now, the file extensions you see before you do not create an exhaustive list, far from it in fact. Furthermore, this doesn't highlight the quantities of the files. For example, a single Autodesk Inventor.iam assembly, at the top right there, could contain hundreds of sub-assemblies and even thousands of inventor IPT part files, each perhaps with their own individual standards PDF documentation, drawing files and so on. Every file needs to be kept in exactly the right place so that the designers and the software knows where to find it. When it comes to managing these files, some of you out there are still having to manage these files manually, either through a built-up folder structure within Windows Explorer, perhaps logged through a Microsoft Excel or Access database, or even earlier methods such as keeping a revision journal, project cards, or, in one example I've witnessed recently, shouting across the office. This can create major challenges for the company, especially the design office. I'm going to list some of these common challenges. This list has been drawn from our experiences of listening to and assisting designers and engineers who have had problems with their designed data management methods. It's fair to assume that the majority of today's audience is, in some way, involved in the engineering design process, so I'm sure you can relate to some, if not all, of these issues at some point through the weekly workflow. Through talking to our own customers, we find that the main data management bottlenecks faced by designers today are searching for and recreating misplaced data, copying similar designs into a new project and renaming all those files with new, unique project IDs, chasing line managers for approval on drawings, or wondering whether you would chase them previously or not, moving data between work in progress and approved folders, tracking all the revisions and evolutions of a file, second guessing which revision is up to date, perhaps investigating who has accessed the data, made an amendment, and establishing the reasons why, and assessing the implications on your earlier projects if you need to change a standard part. Not to mention the times when a production engineer might be standing over you, waiting for an answer on whether the drawing they were given yesterday is the correct one, then bursting into the office later claiming that it wasn't, and that they have just wasted half a day and whatever materials building something that's obsolete. When you look at these points, just ask yourselves, how much time do you, as designers or engineers, actually spend on this? Of course, each one could take only a few minutes, but then you add up those minutes per design job, you'd be surprised how much time is taken away from focusing on design. Alongside that, it only takes one human error to instigate what could later lead on to being a very costly production error. This then leads us on to how the business is affected as a whole. All of those bottlenecks in the design workflow increase the amount of time wasted on design data management to the detriment of actual productivity. This can only be seen as inefficient use of design and engineering staff. We've already identified that the production floor is directly affected by poor design data management, equipment overhead costs, time and materials wasted on incorrect revisions, etc. However, the problem extends beyond the design and engineering teams, affecting sales, purchasing departments, marketing. There is a knock-on effect for sales. If a design team is taking too long over designs for a project bid, it can affect the proposal return date. If a project has been awarded and is overrunning, you're in danger of breaching contract terms and ultimately damaging repeat custom. For management, a lack of control over design data can have an impact on project progress reporting and forecasting, resulting in a reduced ability to prioritize upcoming or overdue workloads effectively. For organizations who are trying to maintain their ISO accreditation, a company can lose this distinction through insufficient data management auditing procedures. Then there is the all-important intellectual property, ensuring that your data integrity is intact and regularly backed up, secure from unauthorized external access, and traceable from internal access. Team morale is an often overlooked factor. Relationships between departments or colleagues can break down if repeated mistakes affect staff both within and across departments. There are numerous studies and references out there focusing on how the top performers are overcoming the issues stemming from design data with secure, robust systems. Independent research conducted by Tech Clarity, for example, sourced top performing companies and then identified what they are doing to achieve superior financial performance. By the way, in this case, the top performers were identified as those companies growing their revenues and profits 2 to 2.5 times faster than the average companies in the study. They ascertained the main issues faced by the industry, with delivery time to market and revision management scoring particularly high. Note that the need to meet bid deadlines and better use of existing data was still felt by roughly a quarter of the companies taking part in the study. Aura Research delved further into the problems, publishing a paper in 2010 that highlighted the top 5 areas for urgent improvement within companies not implementing workgroup-based data management. Data disorder, design team malfunctions, part data, design history, release confusion, and, outside of the design focus, the common financial problem felt more often by the budget holders of the department in question. So what I'm going to do now is hand you over to Matt, who will walk you through some of the key features that Autodesk have introduced to address those earlier challenges. Autodesk Vault is seen as the cornerstone of Autodesk's data management solution, and, for the purposes of this demo, Matt has set up a squeaky clean vault with 3 dummy users, each set up to have different approval and access permissions. You'll be using this setup to demonstrate how you can quickly and comprehensively search for design data, reuse your existing data through the copy design feature, follow the approvals process and track design versions and revisions, access functionality for teams outside of the design office. You'll then go into the engineering change order process and how these are managed, and finally how you can access designs in the field using the secure web access functionality. Again, please feel free to ask questions using the chat feature on the top right of the screen. So, without further ado, Matt, over to you.
Traditionally, when no document management system is used, Windows Explorer is your tool of choice. But the problem with Windows Explorer is you only see the file name. You get a bit more description, file name, file type, file size, but you don't get enough. You don't get type, you don't get description, title, material, who drew it, where it's used, what it uses. So this is why we use document management, Vault. At the inventor end, all we need to do is check the file in, make Vault aware of the file, and once we've done that, Vault will show us all the good stuff. We've got the same information, file name, file type, but we've now got access to title, we've got version control, we've got revision control, we've got states for the Vault Workgroup and Vault Professional version of the software. You've got life cycles. Is it work in progress? Is it for review? Is it released? It allows us to control who sees what data when, the right people at the right time. At its basic level, as a file manager, Vault allows us to put in and get out lots of information. Windows Explorer will not tell us where a file is used, but Vault will. Selecting a file, we can see on the Where Used tab that this particular file is used on an assembly. The assembly itself is used on a drawing. If we turn that on its head, we select a drawing. The drawing is not used anywhere because it's top of the tree, but it uses an IPT. If I select the drawing for the assembly, the drawing uses the assembly, which in turn uses the parts. Because Vault has got the links between these files and all the references, it can modify those links if needs be. Selecting a file, IDW, it uses the relevant IPT. I can select that IPT and rename it to something else. Give it a new name. The update button there, by the way, will update the part number as well as the file name. Some companies want them in sync, other companies don't. Once we've renamed the file, Vault will also fix any references. So the old name IDW has been fixed so that it points to the new name IPT. We can do it at one at a time. We can batch rename stuff. Because Vault understands the links, we can move files. If I create a new folder, all I need to do is drag and drop from one folder to the other. The process in the background fixes the files. This part is still used on its relevant drawing in a different folder. Vault has fixed all those references. Having spent days, weeks, months designing something, if you need to reuse it, With Windows Explorer, it's a case of copy and pasting and then fixing all the individual references. You want the new part to be on the new drawing, the new assembly to reference the new sub-assemblies. This is a job in its own right. Or you start from scratch and draw everything again. Within Vault, we can take an existing design and copy it. Vault has the intelligence to know what is linked to what. By creating a new set of drawings along with a new set of parts, we can see here the files are changing from being reused to being copies. Very quickly then, out the other end, we have a new version of the assembly with a full set of its own documentation. QS assembly is used on QS drawing. QS assembly utilises the new QS parts. It reuses a standard component. What this means is 6 weeks work can be replicated in 6 hours. 6 days work can be replicated in 5 minutes. The Uses tab tells us where it's used. The Where Used tab obviously tells us where it's used. Now that I've copied the design, because it is a new design, it's a new project in effect, I'm just going to drag and drop those files into the new folder just to put them in the right place. Going forward, I now have effectively 2 gaskets. I've got the original gasket and this one, which is the new one. I may have many gaskets throughout the whole of Vault, which could contain thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of files. To be able to find a specific file, we can do quite a generalized search, typing in a piece of information that you know, gasket for example, and that pulls in 2 components. That list is 2 in this case. It could be 50 results, it could be 100 results. To give a little bit more focused result, using the find and the advanced find options, I can add multiple criteria together. So file name contains QS. I'm being specific on the project that I'm looking into. But I also want any component with the title that contains gasket. And in this case, it returns the one specific value rather than potentially hundreds of values. If you're looking up a component called bolt, you're probably going to get more results than you actually need. If you're looking up bolt socket head M6, you'll get a much more refined, smaller search results. Looking at Vault Workgroup and Vault Professional, where we get additional functionality. Revision management, approval control now. As a designer, I'm logged in as Dave Designer, I've got access to work in progress files. I can view them, but more importantly, I can check them out, I can make modifications, I can check them in. I get a history then, I get multiple versions of the file. As an engineer, those very same files are viewable, but we can see there that they're locked. They're not able to be checked out. An engineer can't make modifications to the files, but he can view them. As the designer, when I'm happy with the project, I'm ready to move it on to the next phase, I can change the state of that file and move it to review. Once the file has been sent to review, we can see that they're locked. I can still view the files. What I can't do is check them out and make modifications. Logging in as the engineer now, if I refresh the screen, they are for review. They're still locked. I can't make modifications to the files themselves, but I can change the state. I can review the file. If I find an issue, I can send it back to work in progress, at which point the designer can check it out and rework the file. Or if I'm happy with the design, I can send it to released. Now at the moment, if we look at our shop floor user, we're using shop floor just as an example in this case, but it could be anybody that needs read access to the file once it's signed off. The shop floor, the marketing department, accounts, purchasing, whoever it may be. The shop floor user doesn't have visibility of anything other than release drawings. You don't want somebody printing something and manufacturing it before it's ready. When the engineer releases those files, again, they are locked to everybody, the padlock. They're visible to some groups. The designers have visibility at all times, the engineers have visibility at all times, but only when a file is released does it become visible to the shop floor. Then, if it's there, you can print it, you can manufacture it. During any design phase, things change. A file gets released, a revision is required, change the design, re-drill a hole, whatever it might be. At this point, the engineer would send that file back to its work in progress state, which would then allow the designer to pick up on that file and again check it out, make the relevant changes and go from there. You'll notice that the revision has automatically been bumped. It started as revision A, it's now revision B. So the revision nomenclature is controlled by Vault. It could be A, B, C, it could be 1, 2, 3. You have methods for formatting it to suit your requirements. Again, once the design has been finished, we can change the state and send it through the life cycles. The shop floor no longer has visibility of the files because they are no longer released, and those files are now re-released and they appear back on the shop floor. In addition to file management, revision control, approval of files, we can also use items. Now, an item is a container of things. It represents the project itself, not necessarily the files that document the project. File management, IPT, IAM, IDW, it's all about the CAD files. Although you can put any file into Vault, it's the CAD user that tends to put them in there. With items, you put the CAD file into an item. An item represents the file, but it can also represent something else. It could be a spec sheet, it could be a photograph, it could be another piece of documentation, a spreadsheet. Something that's required as part of the project, as part of the overall design, but isn't produced by the drawing office. By assigning an item to an assembly, we can see there that the assembly has pulled in all the components underneath it, so items will be created for each component. Once we've got the item, that item can be viewed as a normal file. We've got some general information. This item is an assembly which belongs on an IDW, on a drawing. We've got history, we've got bill of materials, we've got where used, etc. Now the bill of materials for an item is not the bill of materials for an assembly. In an assembly, an IAM, the bill of materials is generated and driven by the CAD application, by Inventor. So as an Inventor user, I can look at the bill of materials, but as a person in another department, without a CAD package, a non-designer, I don't have access to that data. As an item though, I've got access to the bill of materials for the item, which is, as a starting point, the same as the bill of materials for the CAD data. But in addition to that, I can also modify that bill of materials. There may be things within the business that are associated to this particular project, this particular component, that are not part of the CAD world. I can right click and edit, and I can add and remove rows. I can browse to and get at other components, other items that have been added via different departments. I can change the quantity. There are 6 bolts on this design, for example, but I'm going to change the quantity and make it 8. The CAD design requires 6, but the shipped product will send 2 spare, just to capture that information going forward. Items themselves have life cycles. In the same way a part can be work in progress or sent for review, which can then be released or sent back to work in progress. The same can be said for items. Changing the state of an item from work in progress to review is an indication again that other departments need to check out this file, make the relevant recommendations, and it can either be passed upwards and be released or sent back down, back to work in progress for additional changes. Once an item is released, it's locked. People can view it, but they can't make modifications. The locking of an item can be set up to lock the part, the assembly that's on that item, or the two can be separate. As a day-to-day job, you can change the states of the files and send it to released, then add it to an item, and the item is effectively released straight away, or you can drive them independently. It depends, as a business, what your preferred method is. What we're going to look at now is ECOs, engineering change orders. What we can see on screen, we've got a number of items that are locked. They are released. Items can be dealt with in their own right in life cycles, work in progress, review, released, as can files. We can also utilise engineering change orders. At the moment, the item we can change the state on its own, make it work in progress, modify, etc. By adding this to a new change order, anybody can create a change order. The shop floor find a problem with a component not fitting. The designer suddenly realises a component doesn't do its job properly. Anybody can request an ECO. Engineering change order number, we can create number schemes. This one itself just increments by 1 each time. Quick title, change me. Detailed description of the changes being made. The record that's involved, it could be an item, it could be a file, but this is essentially the assembly that needs to be modified. Comments, we could add some additional comments in there if needs be. Files, the item itself is being modified, but by the time we boil it down, we need to make changes to the assembly and to the drawing that live on that particular item. Routing, this is the route that the engineering change order takes through the company. Who creates it? Who approves it? Who signs off on it? Are there a number of people in a number of different departments that need to yay or nay this particular engineering change order? For the purposes of today, we'll just use the fast track one just because it's a lot easier and it's a lot quicker. Now, looking at the status tab, anybody can create an ECO. Once you've created it, you've told Vault what components need changing and why. We save. Once we've created it, we can then submit it. Again, anybody can submit it. The engineering change order is now in the system. If I try to edit it now, I don't have the permission. I can create it as a designer, as a shop floor user, as an engineer, but I can't modify it. The right people at the right time having access to the right information. Logged in now as Mike Manager, the manager's got access to it. I can view and respond the ECO. I can respond directly. If I already know the information that's on it, I can just quickly submit and get on with something else. In this case, I'll just edit it. We can see that we've got the same information. The item itself is released. Something that's released cannot be modified. So from the ECO, I will make changes to the item state. So put that into work in progress. It's worth at this point pointing out, going back to the Dave Designer login, on a non-ECO item, you can change the state via the item itself. On an ECO based item, the change state is not available. So by putting something onto an ECO, it locks it and it forces that item, that file, to go through the correct process. So back to Mike Manager, I've changed the item to work in progress, which will allow somebody to make modifications. Again, I can look at the information and maybe add some components, some items. Status, it's currently open. As the manager, I agree that this change needs to be made, or I disagree, it's not a problem. I can cancel the ECO completely, or I can submit. Submitting it sends it through to work, which then allows the designer to make whatever modifications are required. If this is a fast track ECO, I can submit and force approval. I don't need to go through the checking stages. It's a spelling mistake, just print it, versus an entire redesign of the product. So I'm going to send this to submit. Email notification, again, not switched on this particular machine, but the right people, designers in this case, would get an email notification to let them know that that particular item needs working on. We can see we have a work list. Were we to check this out every day when we came in, we could see all the different files that have changed state and are available to be modified, so you know how much work is in front of you for that particular day. Once the designer has made the changes, we can then again edit. Now, the Mike Manager can't edit to this. All they've done is approve it. The manager doesn't sign off on the change, but the manager approves the change. Logging in as Ed Engineer, we'll look at editing it. I can now submit it for checking. As an engineer, I can't check it. Mike Manager, I can. So different users, different groups have the right permissions at the right place. You don't necessarily want the person who's checking it to also approve it. You don't want the designer to also approve it. We've checked it. We can either reject it and send it back to work in progress, or we can approve it and send it forward to review. Again, we can edit it. The group that Mike Manager is part of does allow the checking and the reviewing. We can reject it or send it through to approval. So once it's approved, effectively the file can be reprinted, sent to site, everybody's happy. However, because this is a component being revised, we might have 100 of them in stock already. What do we want to do with those stock items? Do we just throw them away? The modification that we've just made on this ECO needs to be immediate. Or can we accept the stock being used up over the next 6 months, but when that is used up, we need to make sure we manufacture the new version. The last thing we need to do on an ECO to make it live to set the effectivity. We can set that to be immediate, i.e. today, or we can set it for some point in the future, i.e. use the stock items up first before you manufacture the new ones. Now that that ECO is closed, that ECO itself utilises a particular item. The item has been up revisioned, so it's now revision D because it's gone released to work in progress and back again. That is now available to change its state independently. When it's on an ECO, it is controlled by the ECO.
Thanks very much for that, Matt. One thing I didn't mention in the beginning was a common fear when thinking about implementing data management, that being the initial concerns over downtime, integration risks, etc. If I've just read your mind, I'm sure that those who are using the basic edition of Vault already will say the same, that Vault is incredibly scalable. It can be tested alongside existing practices, perhaps on one workstation at first, then maybe rolled out via a central server to the wider design team, perhaps rolled out further to other departments on your site, or even other sites. Perhaps you want it to integrate with your existing ERP and purchasing systems for automated bill of materials, processing, etc. The point is, you choose how far and how fast you want it to go. We can certainly support you with this decision-making process, and I actively encourage you to get in touch and discuss how Vault might address your own challenges. So let's turn our attention now to the chat feature, and again invite any questions from the audience. If the question is fairly bespoke, by the way, or it requires a more in-depth answer, we'll contact you back afterwards via email.